This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today I'm really happy to be joined by Bea. I used to think of her as Bea Burke, but she's now Bea Andrews, but I say she is now because that's ridiculous, because actually she's been married for 8 years or more, much more.
Longer, yes, so 2009, so that will be 15 years.
Yeah. There we are. Anyway, and the reason I know Bea is that she was our head gardener before Josie, and she lived here at Perch Hill for 5 or 6 years and ran the garden here. And do you know what? Bea is responsible for the Venetian tulip collection, which has been one of the best-selling tulip collections in the company for decades. And that is because it is so good. And the thing about Bea is she has a wonderful eye. So she's really, really brilliant gardener and horticulturalist. But now, since she has had her family, which is why she left, she got married here, in fact, at Perch Hill, and has a son who's now well into his teenage years. But she's come back to join us as our florist because she now has her own business with a little flower farm, and she runs training and teaching and does lots of wedding events and parties and things. And she's called Botanika Floral. But anyway, welcome, Bea. It's so lovely to be back in touch.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me. It's a real honour. And just so lovely to be able to talk about all the flowery things, and it's just lovely to be back in touch, making flowers and decorating Perch Hill.
It is. It's so nice. It's a real nice tying together of ends, isn't it? So, Bea, tell us your background. You're Hungarian originally. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I grew up in Hungary, in the city of Budapest. We lived in a kind of quite grand but quite kind of run-down city apartment, and Mum had a massive big balcony which was always full of flowers. So I think, yes, my mum was always really into growing things, and my grandpa who was a greengrocer, and they lived sort of in the green belt of the city, and they had a bigger garden, and he just grew the most amazing things and fruit trees that we can't grow in the UK that grow very well because the summers are so much hotter in Central Europe. So he had an amazing garden, and I spent a lot of time with my grandpa. I just remember all the lovely things, picking cherries and apricots and things just from the trees in the garden, and you didn't need any greenhouses or anything. And he had things like a root cellar that he designed and made in the garden, so he could, in the really cold winters, which we used to have in Hungary, he would store all these vegetables right through the winter. And it's like a little underground cellar that he dug out and built a top over. And then he would be storing veg in sand, like layers of sand, like root vegetables and potatoes and all sorts of things. And there was a lot of flowers in my granny's garden. So I think she would have had, all the peonies and the roses and the lilacs. So that was really lovely memories from that.
And so just back to your grandfather. So basically it was like a veg clamp, really. It's like, so we make them above ground so that you do a layer of sand and then put your beetroot and the sand and then carrots and so he dug it down into the ground.
Yeah, so he went underground because, of course, if you go below ground, the temperatures are much more stable and no frosts. And so he just stored everything down there. It was quite a simple structure, and if you read about all of these American organic growers in the 70s and that you read a lot of these sorts of structures and various really clever DIY ideas of how to keep your veg growing throughout the winter. But I have this memory of that grandpa being really resourceful with all these things. And he had a large greengrocer's shop. So they would be, him and my granny would be selling the veg and the fruit, not from his garden because it didn't produce quite so much stuff. But yeah.
And did they do also lots of bottling and fermenting?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. So because it really wasn't the culture of massive freezers and everything had to be preserved, jams or pickles or fermenting. And my mum still does that. I mean, in fact, my sister's just been to visit me, which is lovely, but it's always like an expedition for her to bringing all these lovely jams, apricot jams and things that she still makes. So that's really nice. So yeah, that's quite a tradition there still to preserve stuff.
And so then how did you come to Britain?
So I grew up in kind of behind the Iron Curtain. So it was still it was before all the changes happened in Central Europe. And I really loved sciences. I loved things to do with plants. And it's sort of science things, I still love reading, books about microbiology and botany and historical stuff about that. So Mum thought that would be a great idea if I became a doctor, especially that my best friend came from a family of medics. So I did try and I did a year. It didn't really work out for me, but it was a very interesting year learning. So I was just thinking, how to go about this whole thing that I'd like to learn about plants and do some more science. So I went and did a course at a uni in Hungary, and it was to do with crop sciences, agri-sciences, and I could study stuff about organic growing, a lot of botany, which was really nice. And I had a friend she came from family and they were all botanists. So her dad was heading one of the big university botany departments, and he was just an amazing wealth of knowledge. So they lived in this lovely building in the middle of the city, there's a botanic garden. I don't know if you've been to Budapest or a little bit. There's sort of like a city botanic garden. Yeah. It's quite small, but it's packed with beautiful things. And so I used to spend a lot of time there with my friend and her mum, both mum and dad, and they were just very keen on, showing us everything. And I think in between us, we decided that we weren't going to be studying just the conventional agri-sciences, which was very much to do with, growing big monocrops. And
yes,
we had to do some of it, but we also had the choice of, studying a bit of environmental sciences and organic growing and microbiology, but biotechnology, but it was mostly about growing GM crops, which I wasn't so interested in doing that. So I kind of went down the ornamental horticultural kind of line and studied bits of medicinal herbs and how to grow them and how to use them. So during our years, we had the chance to do some work experience in the UK. So we thought that would be excellent because I really wanted to travel.
Yeah.
And my friend had connection to come out to England to do some work and make some notes and do a little kind of do a sort of like a work on an organic farm. So we went one year, we went down to Somerset and we worked there, and I just made lots of notes because it was all very early days in Hungary, about organic growing, and they're a little bit lagging behind quite a few things. But and also, that's just the choices of gardens and places to work in England were just in that sort of area. It was just so much more choice. So we ended up coming to England to do some work experience here, and so I worked with some really lovely growers around the south of England.
So mainly flowers or veg as well?
So I worked with old-fashioned fruit growers who used to graft hundreds of varieties of fruit trees, not just the handful that they grow nowadays in the orchards you can buy in the supermarkets. So sadly, quite a few of them now, too old or not around anymore. But then I also worked at a sort of like an alpine herb nursery, where I mostly sort of work with propagation and, producing lots of plants. And I went there where they didn't have a very good kind of prop department where things weren't growing so well. And I walked in and I thought, well, I mean, I can't tell all these women that they've been doing this for years, but something's not quite right. So I thought they didn't so much like it, but I could see that, this can be done so much better. And so that was great. I really enjoy that. It's just really so common sense on how you sow your seeds and how you look after them and cuttings. And so that was fantastic.
And then how did you come to here, Bea? Or because you were only in your late 20s when you came here, weren't you?
Yeah. So what year was it? 2005. So I was 32.
Okay.
So I in the meantime, I also worked at another place, which was Liz Frost Nursery, which is a specialist shrub grower. So we grew lots of really rare stuff. And I learned so much from this lady, Judy, she's a great propagator. And she taught me a lot of things about how to ID plants just from, looking at them more botanically about, flowers and the shapes of the leaves and how they connect to the stems and all that. And she used to test me about some plants, see if I recognize it. And they also did a lot of plant breeding, which was amazing. My boss, Peter, used to be a great kind of ideas man. He always wanted to kind of, get new varieties on the market, which he introduced quite a few really nice shrubs. He used to go on plant hunting trips into China and the Himalayas in various places, and they'd come back with bits of cuttings and stuff that they, or I think, they nearly sort of drowned in a river because wanted to get a variegated leaf of a plant that was overhanging somewhere. So it was lovely. And then we did quite a lot of plant breeding from seeds there. So which is, as you would know, you do lots of plant breeding at Perch Hill. That it just takes a long time.
Yes,
it's hard work, and it's years of work that goes into something that gets like a plant breeder's right on it. Or so it's but it was very interesting. Always very exciting to see what comes up from a whole load of. I think it was Caryopteris. We were trying to get some new varieties for cutting, actually.
And then, so Bea, how did that all lead to cut flowers and floristry and your interest in that and what you're doing now? Where was the bridge point?
So after that, I had a kind of like a brief time working elsewhere. So things were changing with my first husband, unfortunately. So I had to change jobs and move house and split up and everything all at once. And that's when Perch Hill kind of came about. I think a friend of mine was looking through some adverts, and she found the job advert from Perch Hill that you were looking for a new head gardener. So I thought, well, I need to kind of get on with moving and finding somewhere to work and live and everything. So I came to Perch Hill, and funny enough, I wasn't really kind of acquainted with any of the Sarah Raven range or anything at the time, because I don't know when you started Perch Hill, but you've probably been going then for about 10, 15 years or something. But I didn't really know much about it apart from maybe reading the catalogues, But it was an amazing thing to, just to come to Perch Hill and then look around. I think this was in November, so the garden didn't look its best, but it was still had the skeletons of all the grandeur of the summer and everything. So I came to Perch Hill and then took the job. And I think it's because it was the time when you and Adam moved to Sissinghurst, so I think it was soon after. So and then you offered me to stay at Perch Hill as no one was living there in any of the buildings at the time. So I actually just, you generously gave me part. I think it was the Oast House I started in, and it was a bit of musical chairs going on, moving from one building to the other. But I had managed to move all my things, and I just was completely lost myself in that job. It was just so amazing. I couldn't believe it. It was just such a creative place to be, and and meeting you and all your ideas and all the plant trials and things we did there, and I think the growing part wasn't too difficult, because I've done so much of quite similar things or more complicated things, the propagation, and so that was an easy bit, growing things in the polytunnels and planting things out. But everything else that came with it, at the time, I think you were writing your two first cookbooks in those years.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yes.
And it was a period where we had a lot of famous chefs and restaurateurs and people coming to. Do you remember that time? There's loads of really interesting people that I was just completely starstruck every 5 minutes. It was really lovely. And then all the things we grew in the garden, obviously, they all appeared in the cookbooks, so which was lovely. And there's lots of funny stories as well, things that I knew at the time that, well, I'm going to be telling this my grandchildren. To do with, I think, the late Antonio Carluccio used to come down to Perch Hill to do his classes and evenings of dinner parties and things, and I had this Goldilocks moment one day when I think we just finished work, and we all like it is now, we all went and had that in at serving up the dinners and helping at the school. And I ran back upstairs where I lived in the Oast house on the first floor at that time. And then I opened the door and I found Carluccio sleeping in my bed. And I thought, oh,
what are you doing there?
Wake him up. What's he doing there? And I think he had a bad back at the time. So then it was my friends my friends from Tunbridge Wells, they came to help out in the evening with the waitressing and everything. And one of them was an osteopath, so we had to ring her up. Can you bring your treatment table with you? Because Carluccio is not moving; his back's all gone. So all of those things.
That's funny. I'd completely forgotten that.
There were so many funny stories, and going and helping you with all the away days, and we used to do a lot of I think you used to do sort of swapsy workshops and classes with River Cottage.
Yes.
So they would come to Perch Hill and then do all their meat curing and what have you, all the classes, and then you would go down there to Devon, Dorset. So
that's right.
So we had all those days, and I just remember. I was just thinking, that I could be name dropping every 5 minutes about all the people who turned up at Perch Hill, but there was one day, I don't know if you remember this, I came along to help you down at River Cottage to do your flower classes and set up shop and everything, and it was, I think it was the day before we started the classes. So you said you took me around to lots of people that you planned to just pop in on and visit, and I mean. On that day, I thought, well, I'll write down who we visited that day. And I think we started off stopping at your friend Johnny Bowden's in his Dorset pile, and, it's a beautiful garden. And then went on to have cup of tea with Penelope Hophouse, who's your godmother.
Godmother, yes.
That's it. And in her, I think in her previous garden, which was... Yes. Absolutely beautiful. I just remember having a cup of tea with her and you, and I'm thinking it's just amazing. And a couple of other things. And Kate Hubbard, your friend Kate, who also had an amazing garden. I don't know if it was their parents' garden. So that was beautiful. And I think it finished off the evening was. Hugh was cooking dinner for everybody. So I thought, well, I can't get any better than this. It's just, it was just so wonderful, apart from obviously being part of growing, and because you gave me so much freedom in choosing plant combinations for all, the catalogue. And,
well, you're so good at it.
The colours.
You're so good at it. Well, so Bea, we must begin to wind up, but you're back with us. It's so lovely, and I see you out the window walking around with lots of buckets. And so Bea now comes back for all our open days, and she comes the day before and spends the whole day picking and then arranging from the garden. So maybe we could finish with just you telling us whatever time of year that you arrive. I mean, we're only open from March until October, but how do you decide what to pick when you come here? There is obviously, hopefully, so much. How do you decide what to pick and select?
I think it's because we worked with the plants in the garden so much. I know the garden quite well and what grows around in the hedgerows and everywhere.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, since I've left and came back to Perch Hill, the available variety of stuff is plants and cut flowers and shrubs. It's just so much bigger than it was in the early days.
Yes.
So I always have a good chat with Josie, the head gardener.
Yes.
So she always tells me which areas they might be actually maybe cutting back, and then we could clearing, and so we can use quite a lot of that, and what areas I need to be maybe a bit more careful just to make sure there's enough flowers to look at for open days when people come. So can't really strip the garden, but also I need to pick quite a lot of ingredients for all the different arrangements all over the greenhouses and the shop and the barn. So we have a chat, and I've always got a list of things that potentially would be really, really good to cut. And then when you look through, I think it's the best place for looking at what we pick and what we use at Perch Hill is I always put pictures up on the actual urns on the wig that we make, the large urn. So it's a really good seasonal kind of diary of what we pick at the garden. And it's on my Instagram account. There's lots of those pictures. So it just changes every year, and every week and every month, really, each season just so different.
And so let's give your Instagram tag again so people can look them up. So it's Botanika Floral.
Yeah, Botanika Flora, and it's Botanika is my kind of umbrella, so business name for being a freelance florist, gardener. I teach a few workshops, not quite so many, and also do some weddings in the wedding season.
Yeah. And so month by month you come, and you mainly pick from the cutting gardens, don't you? But you also pick some veg and things. I mean, they are absolutely beautiful Bea's arrangements. I mean, they couldn't be more beautiful.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. I mean, there's also the Oast Garden. I mean, all areas at Perch Hill, you can just you can pick. And often I arrive, and sometimes I see Adam in the morning, and he would go, "Well, this week doesn't look so good. Are you going to be able to pick anything?" There's always something to pick. So if it's not going to be maybe like large focal blooms everywhere, because maybe that's not that week, but then we'll just fill it with something else, texture and foliages and hips and, berries and what have you. So there's always something to pick. This is it. So we never panic because there's always lots to pick, but there's always just so much anyway available.
Yeah. So I really wanted the listeners to find out a bit about who you were and your background and everything, because Bea's actually going to post really regularly now on our social media channels, so on Instagram, on our stories and on the grid, and we're going to do videos with her. We did a video of Bea making our Christmas wreaths and Christmas decorations. And that came out of actually, I walked into the staff room where, funnily enough, we were hanging all our dried flowers. And it was the most beautiful sight. Bea was wrapping all these dried flowers for me to take away for a workshop in tissue paper and brown paper. And then she posted a film of it. And I was just suddenly like, this is just so beautiful. So all through 2025, Bea is going to be here, and whenever she's here, we're going to record it, and what she's picked and the arrangement that it turns into. And so there's going to be both still photography on Instagram, but also lots of videos appearing on Facebook, etc. So it's just really, really lovely to chat to you, Bea, and we're going to be seeing lots more of you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really love talking to you about all of these things. It's lovely. I look forward to making those videos.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me. And this week it was with Bea Andrews. Now she was Burke, she's now Andrews. It was lovely to talk to her and kind of find out what she's up to, including doing the floristry at Perch Hill for all our open days and events. Next week, I'm joined by a really exciting young guy called Alfie Nickerson, who is growing acres of dahlias in North Norfolk. And he's a young guy with great enthusiasm for nature and flowers, and has a flower farm there. Well, not just dahlias, annuals too. So join me then. It's going to be a really interesting listen. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.